In the year of 1845, prominent thinker Karl Marx was exiled from Germany and moved to London together with his wife and children, where he continued writing and formulating his theories about social and economic activity. Marx and his collaborator Friedrich Engels would work together, and Marx would spend a lengthy period of time researching extensively in the reading room of the British Museum, becoming immersed in English thought. According to the German philosopher Oswald Spengler, the time Marx spent in the British Museum formulating his theories is crucial to understanding the influence that English thought had on Marx, and thus just how deeply it actually impacted the Marxist theory in general. Marx was influenced by English thought, and thus both he and his followers reflect the English spirit in their attitudes towards work. For example, the Englishman only wants to work or support workers' rights so that eventually he won't have to work and can be a gentleman or businessman. For the Englishman, work is merely a means to gain wealth or capital. The Englishman traditionally values outer freedom, namely liberalism and freedom of movement, but inner compliance, namely social norms and closed-mindedness, whilst the German traditionally values inner freedom, namely German idealism, and outer compliance, namely rigidity and dutiful discipline. The English spirit is to work to live. Work is not preferable, but is a necessity to survive. The German spirit is to live to work. Work is not a bothersome chore or necessity, but a valued duty. The German-spirited individual may enjoy working and would prefer to work than not work. The traditional German values their work as a contribution to the greater good. The traditional German didn't see themselves as an individual, but as part of something greater than oneself. The German didn't seek wealth as a primary motivator or goal. The German would seek positive recognition for good work and values rank or promotion more highly than money. The Marxist is envious of those who are already his ideal man, namely the businessman. The Marxist merely wants to replace them with himself. The Marxist doesn't really value the worker, only as a means to topple the bourgeoisie expropriators by convincing the worker to sell their commodity of labor. For Marx, there is no honor in work. He is just envious of those who do not have to work. If the workers seize the means of production, they are no longer workers and become business owners. When you are a business owner, you decide when you work and when you don't. And if you decide not to work, you are not a worker by definition, at least by traditional German standards. Western-centric Marxism is a flawed idea, especially in the modern globalized world, because if you refuse to work and act as a merchant only wishing to sell your labor to the highest bidder, it's likely you will just get replaced by a non-Marxist worker or an immigrant willing to work for a wage that you rejected. The genuine community-minded conservative is the only one who seems to care for the worker or for the act of working. Spengler thus maintained that the real right wing are the only true defense against the bourgeoisie or gentleman class, because unlike the Marxist, the real right-winger doesn't just want to replace that class with himself. The real right-winger values his working identity. Hence, Spengler refers to Marxism as capitalism for the working class, and not genuine socialism. A poetic dialectic is as follows. The Teutonic knight worker with pride and honor in his work versus the Viking proletariat who works to survive. The private worker or merchandising laborer, as in the ideal Marxist proletariat, is not a worker. You're not a worker if you get to pick and choose when you work. You're not a worker if you don't work. Or more precisely, you are an English-spirited worker in name, not a German-spirited worker in fact. Workers' rights are therefore seemingly English in spirit, because the English/Marxist ideal is to not work or not be overworked. The English spirit would rather do anything but work. Mind you, work doesn't just mean manual labor. The proletariat is the unskilled masses forced to work to survive. Deep down, they absolutely do not want to work. They were brought into the cities and into society to work in the factories during the Industrial Revolution. Before that, they were serf farmers or laborers. Germany didn't get industrialization until later. Hence, they were a primitive culture and community for a longer period, and with their different conception of work, they obviously had different social outcomes. In the modern-day Western world, since we are so saturated in English liberalism, with wealth and rights being of the greatest concern to our civilization, of course liberalism is going to conflate socialism with Marxism, even wrongly so. But to better understand socialism, you must look to the German spirit and its characteristics. There is nothing grossly wrong with Gemeinschaft or community. It's just a foreign concept to those who adopted English liberalism. Modern-day German liberals are effectively just role-playing as English liberals. History suggests it's not in the typical German nature to be an individual. Germans are socialists by way of long tradition. Once again, traditionally the Englishman had external freedom but internal restriction, whilst the traditional German had external restriction but internal freedom. Hence, it's no wonder that the campaign of the NSDAP was a powerful one. Firstly, think about the driven, hard-working, collectivist and hugely idealistic nature of the traditional German people. Now consider the sorts of inspired feelings and passion that the leader was able to invoke in the people. He really spoke to the German spirit and to what they viewed themselves as. Having a legitimate understanding of that spirit and the ideology that aligns with it doesn't mean that you necessarily must believe the ideology. Just at least aim to understand it and treat it with intellectual honesty, as any proper scholar ought to do.